Welcome to the Elevate Media Podcast with your host, Chris Anderson. In this show, Chris and his guests will share their knowledge and experience on how to go from zero to successful entrepreneur. They have built their businesses from scratch and are now ready to give back to those who are just starting. Let's get ready to learn, grow, and elevate our businesses. And now, your host, Chris Anderson.
Welcome back to another recording of the Elevate Media Podcast. I'm Chris Anderson, your host. Today, I want to talk about something I learned or improved upon recently, and that is when you're setting up your cameras to record video, or you're recording a big production video or on-site interview or things of that nature. Something I improved on just recently are the video angles and the framing we're using on those recordings. So if you're recording video, I hope that this can help you like it did me. Let's dive into it. So angles and framing depend a lot on the shot you're doing. Right now in my studio at home is just a talking head straight on video. Now, what could I do to maybe make this a little bit better as far as recording and as production value goes? I could probably add one of our second cameras off to the side here on a tripod. And then as the video is going, as you're watching this, it could cut to that B-roll, that second camera B, whatever you call it in your world. And so you have that ability to have that second clip on your main episode. So as you're going about it, it just changes. Again, it's a way to keep people engaged because you switch something up on the screen. But that's one simple thing, a second camera. Having my phone as a third camera, maybe off to the other side, so I could have B-roll footage with my phone. Could be another option for video angles. For this production here in my home studio, our slider is not something I want to really set up and do, but a slider is something that you can think about incorporating or investing in, where you can put a camera on this track that's motorized, and it gives you a gradual, real slow, real steady movement of the camera. And so you can get that just subtle change, a subtle movement on your B camera or even on your A camera, and have that cinematic just a little bit different than just a still video. And then what really we do and what we like to do with the interview setting when you have two people is over the shoulder, OTS. So you have A going over the shoulder of the interviewer talking to the interviewee. So the interviewer would be a little blurred right here on the side. You just see part of their head and shoulder, basically. Call that dirty. They're dirty because you can't see them clearly. And then the second camera would be focusing on the interviewer, and the guest would be right over here on the left side of the screen, but the opposite side. You'd be seeing them blurred just a little bit or dirty in frame there. So that just gives a little bit different dynamic with your recording setup. And then you could have a wide angle, have both people in there on a slider and having it come across just barely moving, just a slight movement with that main camera. So you could have three cameras set up, and that all gives you options of, if there's a mess up, you could cut to another camera. It also gives you just that cinematic look, a little bit higher production value, and just you can get really fancy with it and crazy with it. But for a simple setup, you could have two webcams, one in front, one to the side, like I mentioned, and switch back and forth, either in post-production, or you can have something like a Stream Deck or something of that nature that you can switch in production, that it does it automatically, which is something we're looking to do, one here in my studio, and as we're growing in our studio locally, just having some multiple options. So those are some things you can think about when it comes to video angles, things you can think about when you're working with your clients on site in your agency, some different ways you can do it. So those are some different video angles. And I learned about some of this and tweaked my perception and my way to do it just slightly this weekend, which is really cool. I'm always learning, and I love learning from other people who have different ideas or different visions with video production and framing and things of that nature and video angles. Now with framing, when you're looking at the setup, you got so much to look at in there. So take your time. You've got to make sure all stands and things are not in the view. You've got to make sure the best you can that you're not seeing reflections of lights in windows or on appliances. Those are things sometimes you don't think about. Sometimes I didn't think about. Had been reminded again this weekend. Oh yeah, look at the window. That light's reflecting. How can we move it? as we were doing these things. So those are all things within framing. And then can you move the camera over just a little bit? So anything in the background, you're not getting like a harsh edge too. For like this, for example, you'll see how the counter on this shoot, we tried to move it in frame so it wasn't as harsh of a stop. So you don't get those hard edges as much with the framing. But think about that. How's the background look? How do the different props or the plants, the things you put in the frame, how does that fill or how does that fit within the frame itself? Do you want is your individual who's focused mainly on center or off to the side just a little bit? Where do you want them in the frame, dependent on what production you want? So those little things that you can look at and make sure, especially if you're coming back and doing multiple days of recordings, okay, are we marking where things are in the frame? So if they get moved, we can put them back. Is there anything in the background that could cause distraction to people that we need to move away, or that's throwing off the aesthetic? And just be wary or be aware of everything in the frame and where you have it positioned. So these are just some tips that can help you create something that's a really cool production with different angles, with different framing, and thinking about all that. And like I said, you can do that with your own studio at home as well. Just getting a second webcam and hooking it in, having two of the videos. So two different angles, shooting the videos, and then in post-production, just cutting one throughout the video or throughout the stream. So as you're focusing on one section, you're going along and then boom, it cuts to the other camera. So those are all things you can do as you're recording your videos, as you're improving video recording and production, or if you're working with your clients, these are things that help you improve your final product for your clients as well. So I hope this brought value to you. I hope you could learn something. I hope it spins some wheels, gets you thinking about what you can do differently and better in your video production. And I'm excited to see how you implement this. So go out, elevate your brand, elevate everything you're doing, and we'll talk again next time.
Thank you for listening to the Elevate Media Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. See you in the next episode.